Today we're going to talk about Workbook 4A, Exercise 15 and 16. This is in the textbook, pages 38 and 39. When you're finished today, you'll do Exercise 15 and 16, and that will be the end of all the multiplication and division. So we've been working and working, adding skills, and today's the last day that we'll work on more skills for multiplying and dividing. Actually, multiplication is all today. And we're going to start by talking about how to multiply 34 by 15. We have done two-digit multiplication, but only by tens, and this time we're multiplying by 34 by 15. So let's talk about what we mean by that. We usually write that in a vertical way like this. This means we have 10 34s, and we have 5 34s, and we put those together. Now we know that 34 tens is 340. If you thought about it, since 5 30s is 15 tens and 5 fours is 20, you would know that 34 times 5 is 170. And when I put those together, I now have 510. So you can see that 510 is how many you have if you have 15 34s. Let's talk about how to do that if we're doing multiplication in a vertical fashion like this. This is what we're thinking. This makes sense. Sometimes it's a bit of a shortcut if we organize it together a little bit. And we're going to talk about several ways to do this. 34 times 15, just like we said before, 5 34s. We know that's 20, and 15 add 2 is 17. So 5 times 34 gives 170. We're not surprised by that. Now think about 10 times 34. Well, you know that 10 times 34 is going to have a 0 in the ones column because it's a 10 times that. And then, of course, 10 times 34 is 34 tens, and I can write that there. It's effectively putting a 0 there because I know I'm multiplying by 10. All we did in the last exercise was multiply by 10 and end up with a 0 in the ones column. And then 1 times 4 is 4, and 1 times 3 is 3. And when I combine these for a final answer and add them together, 7 and 4 makes 11, 3 and 1 make 5. That gives me 510. Now I will tell you this, in the class recordings and in the intensive practice, there are several other ways that it shows you about adding and making, or about multiplication and making it a little bit easier. We're going to do several practice problems to make sure we know how to do these. 64 times 27, and I'm going to do it a little bit color-coded just so we don't get lost. Hopefully the colors won't be too irritating to you. 64 times 27, the first thing I want to do is think of 7 times 64. 7 times 4 is 28. 7 times 6 is 42, but I have 2 more tens, so that gives me 44 tens, and that reminds me that 64 times 7 is 448. I can solve that vertically very easily. And we know that that's true. That's what the 448 means. But if I do 64 times 2, remember this isn't just 2, it's actually 20. 64 times 20 will always have a 0 at the end because it's 64 times 2 tens. So I put a 0 there at the end because when I multiply by 20, I'll always have a 0. And then I have 2 times 4 is 8. But remember, that's 20 times 4, so that's 8 tens. That's why the 8 is in the tens place. 2 times 6 is 12. That's going to be 12 hundredths because it's 20 times 60. So 64 times 2 tens is 128 tens. Let me move that 0. It's kind of over there by itself. And so now I'm going to combine those. 64 times 7 and 64 times 20, when I combine them, has an answer of 1,728. And so 64 times 27 is exactly that, 1,728. And you can multiply it vertically to get that answer. What about 278 times 19? Again, we just had to follow the process. 9 eighths is 72. 9 sevens is 63 tenths. Plus 7 is 70 tenths. 9 times 2 is 18 hundredths. Add 7 for 25 hundredths. Then I have 278 times 10, so I'll have a 0 in the ones column. And then 278 times 10 is going to be 278 tens, 2,780. When I add those together, 2, 8, 12, 5, I have 5,282. And then we jump back and do some multiplication that is not quite so hard, but it causes us to think. Think about 20 times 60. This is 2 times 10 times 6 times 10. 2 times 6 is 12. 10 times 10 is 100. The answer to this is 1,200. And if you look at those numbers, maybe you'll notice that it's 6 times 2 and 2 zeros. It works the same way on every one of these. 5 times 10 and 8 times 10 is 40 times 100. So 4,000, also known as 4,000. Notice that 8 times 5 is 40, and there are 2 zeros after that. So are you brave enough to see that that pattern always works, and to say 9 times 7 is 6,300. 70 times 90 will be 6,300. And you could certainly do the long multiplication to show that. 90 times 70 is going to give me a 0 in the hundred or in the ones place. 9 times 0 is 0. 9 times 7 is 63. Even if I do the long multiplication, I get the same thing. 500 times 3, actually it's 500 times 30. So 5 times 100 times 3 times 10, that's 15 times 100 tens is 1,000. It's the same thing as 10 hundredths. 15 times 1,000 is 15,000. Look what we've done. 5 times 3 is 15, and there are 3 zeros after it. Letter E is 40 times 600. 4 times 6 is 24, and I will have 3 zeros, 1, 2, 3, after the 24. Be careful on F. 4 times 5 is 20. This 0 is part of the 20. And then I need to add 3 zeros onto the back of it, and that answer is going to be 20,000. But wait, there's more. We're going to do a few more things in this assignment, and that is on page 39, we're going to estimate 32 times 68. One of the reasons that we practice multiplying by tens is so that we can do an estimate quickly. 32 times 68 is close to being 30 times 70. So that's 2,100. 48 times 315, that's close to 50 and close to 300. Notice that I didn't make it 320, I just left it to the nearest hundred. The first number is to the nearest 10, the second number went to the nearest hundred. We're just doing a really quick estimation, and 3 times 5 is 15, and I have 3 zeros. That number is going to be approximately 15,000. It's really good to be able to take numbers like that and have a good idea of what it will become. That's a skill that you'll use in life a lot when you're doing an estimate. 49 times 18 is close to being 50 times 20. 5 times 2 is 10. There will be 2 more zeros, so that's about 1,000. Now at any time, as always, you can pause the recording, try it on your own, see if you get the same answers that I do. 21 times 72 is about the same thing as 20 times 70. So that's 14 with 2 zeros, 1,400. 62 times 47 is about 60 times 50. That's 30 with 2 zeros. $412 times 23 is about 400 times 20, so that's 8 with 3 zeros. Estimating is really easy, isn't it? 400 times 60, that will give us 24 with 3 zeros, 24,000. Always just go to where you have a number and then zeros at the end of it, because then it's easy to say 7 times 3 is 21. How many zeros? 3 zeros. That number is about 21,000. 50 times 500. 5 times 5 is 25, and 3 zeros make 25,000. 70 times 800. 7 times 8 is 56, and 3 zeros. Last but not least, 90 times 600 is 54 with 3 zeros, 54,000. Okay, with all of that practice on estimation, you can now do exercises 15 and 16, multiplying by powers of 10 or factors of 10, and doing some estimation. All of these are excellent skills.